Good evening, and welcome everyone to the January 17th, 2024 Yarmouth Planning Board meeting. I am Joanne Crowley, Chair. This is to formally advise that as required by Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, paragraphs 18 to 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations signed into law on June 16th, 2021. The Yarmouth Planning Board will hold a public meeting and a public meeting on January 17th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. The public is welcome to attend in person this evening or via alternative public access provided in the notice of meeting available on the town website. I'd like to begin by taking roll call. Susan Britta, Will Rubenstein.
Present.
Tim Sabin, Peter Slovak.
Here.
Ken Smith.
Present.
Chris Vincent, Joanne Crowley, present. Seeing that we have a quorum, I'd now like to call the meeting to order and ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Dave, I'd like you to allow one of our remote members who's labeled owner into the meeting.
Is the owner one of our planning board members, Susan Britta?
Can you hear me, Joanne?
Yes.
Susan. Yay, Susan. All right.
The unmute button always works.
I'll remember that. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So I'd like to make a note, Kathy, that Susan is present, and that obviously we have a quorum. Welcome, Susan. I hope you're feeling better.
She's back on mute.
He's muted again.
She
It's
muted
okay.
again. Okay. Okay, so let's begin. Included in our packets with regard to the Affordable Homes Act, the first item on our agenda are the notice of a legislative hearing by the Joint Committee on Housing on this Friday, January 18th. Draft comments for consideration by the Planning Board that Kathy has prepared for us to review, comments on that Affordable Homes Act, and then excerpts from the Affordable Homes Act related to two areas of, I think, of concern to us, of interest to us, ADUs and seasonal communities. So I'd like to just ask Kathy to run through what she's prepared for us this evening, and we'll have some discussion. Thank you, Kathy.
I tried to take into consideration everyone's kind of viewpoints throughout the accessory apartment amendments, as well as some of the initial discussions that we had, I believe, back in December when we looked at this. So basically, we kind of went through and kind of highlighted the comments, as Joanne mentioned, specifically to accessory dwelling units, which is related to zoning, and then, of course, the seasonal community designation, which obviously Cape Cod would ultimately, I would think, be classified as a seasonal community. I think one of the first things that is listed here is that the Cape Cod and the islands are, again, clearly seasonal communities, and they should be designated as such now, and a moratorium implemented on ADU zoning changes until that committee can develop policies, programs, and regulatory recommendations that address our distinct needs and issues. Something that might work in other places throughout Massachusetts may not work in our seasonal communities, and let's take a little bit of a pause, figure that out before we start enacting things statewide. I don't know if you want me to go through the whole thing or item by item.
I think that would be helpful, Kathy. So the point here, though, is that they should be designated as such now.
Yes.
That's the important comment with regard to the timing on this.
Correct. And then if they do ultimately implement the ADU zoning, have a moratorium on it until that committee can actually do a little bit of the analysis that they're talking about related to policies, programs, and regulatory recommendations. Because we are a little bit different. We certainly have a lot more stresses from short-term rentals than some other communities that could be impacted by the ADU zoning changes. The second item there is they are really trying to change zoning through a bond bill, and this is basically saying local planning processes and decisions should remain on the local level and not be unilaterally overridden by the state government through the housing bond bill. Yarmouth recently spent the past year working with our community to approve expanded opportunities for accessory dwelling units, AKA accessory apartments, while including reasonable and thoughtful provisions to protect the character of our residential neighborhoods. This is just acknowledging we went through a whole heck of a lot of hard work. Our community spoke. We have something in place, and that's really shouldn't be something that should be unilaterally changed in a housing bond bill. It's not even being done through Chapter 40A. As like a Dover Amendment, where you can't unreasonably regulate certain things like religious institutions or educational institutions. They're doing it in a very unusual way through a housing
Or
bond,
financing bill, essentially.
basically, yes. And the third item there is, one of the things included there is that not allowing for an owner occupancy requirement could change the flavor of our neighborhoods forever by encouraging significant commercial investment in our residential neighborhoods. Off-Cape or absentee landlords are not as invested in our community or neighborhoods like an on-site homeowner would be. As you all know, we spent a lot of time talking about whether we should be allowing second homeowners in order to have an accessory apartment, and ultimately decided we wanted to have someone there, be part of the community, be there with oversight, and have to live in the neighborhood, because I think obviously everyone's going to care a little bit more when they're living with the circumstances within the neighborhood versus just being a landlord who doesn't live there. Item number 4 is they are limiting to the maximum number of parking spaces that you can have for an ADU of 1. So with very limited public transportation available to Cape residential neighborhoods and the potential for ADUs to be dual income households, 2 parking spaces should be allowed and not just limited to the 1 space for the ADU. So in our bylaw, we require 2 for the ADUs. That would not be allowed if this passes. It would only be a maximum of 1. And that might make a lot of sense in the cities where you have easy access to public transportation, and very few people really need a car to get around. Unfortunately, that's not quite the case here on Cape Cod. Number 5 is really talking about how we have significant water quality issues, and all of a sudden we're pushing a bunch of additional housing, and how do the two meet? So Yarmouth has a significant water quality issues, which we are trying to address through the initiation of a wastewater program. However, it will be some time before sewering reaches the residential neighborhoods and significantly improves our local water quality. Loosening the zoning regulations further to push for significant increases in our residential density will have negative impacts on our water quality, which could impact the reason people visit the Cape and obviously the significant revenue that Cape Cod generates for the state. The 6th item there, they do allow, through the Dover Amendment, it's not that things are exempt from zoning, they are exempt from unreasonable regulation. So they do allow in this bond bill to allow for you to reasonably regulate, including prohibiting them from being used for short-term rentals. But the comment here is that implementation of these any zoning changes for ADU, so if they do move forward, should include sufficient time for each community to develop the reasonable regulations allowed by the housing bond bill, especially related to prohibition on short-term rentals. Seasonal communities have significant short-term rental pressures, and ADUs should be restricted to address year-round and/or workforce housing needs. I think we have a lot of provisions that we would still want to keep. And I think you might be able to with the reasonable. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be allowed by special permit. This would call for, the bond bill calls for it to be by right. And then the 7th item there was something that Mary Wagon included, just to kind of say, you know what, Yarmouth actually does a lot of stuff already, and kind of indicate that Yarmouth's zoning bylaw, including a new, easier-to-use accessory apartment bylaw, is in line with the town's vision and our robust housing program. Guided by the state's call for housing, the town has also, and then she lists adopted by right multifamily housing, that's through our VCOD and our HMOD overlay districts. B, dedicated the majority of its local Community Preservation Act funds and U.S. HUD CDBG entitlement on the creation and preservation of affordable housing. I think it's like 40% of CPA money has gone towards affordable housing. C is created and capitalized an affordable housing trust, which has created over 200 new affordable housing units to date and is planning for 50 additional units. We have a very strong affordable housing trust here in Yarmouth that does a lot of great work. D is indicating that we have created a pre-development fund to initiate redevelopment of underutilized and blighted sites for the creation of residential or mixed-use development, so we have that available to people. E is that we just updated our housing production plan, and then, of course, we have Mary Wagon, who we have employed a full-time housing staff person, and not every community has that. And then just summarizing, the town has achieved broad-based support for its housing program through thoughtful and community-based planning. In this spirit, we hope the state allows the benefits of home rule in our zoning bylaw and allows our new accessory apartment bylaw to stand.
So what we would like to take action on this evening is transmitting these comments as any of us would like to amend. And I trust that we would all agree to send some comments in. This is a fairly extensive bill that affects us directly. So thank you, Kathy, for putting together these comments for us to consider. It does, I think, represent some of the more important agreed-upon views that the planning board has, where we have agreed in the past during our discussions on all of these items. And so that I'm hoping that this might be a document that we could all agree to forward to the Joint Committee on Housing for their hearing on the 18th. So I'd like to ask any members for any comments on the letter, or if they have concerns about sending the letter at all.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll jump in first on this one. You know, the comments I think are very well done, and I'm in complete support of all the bullet point items or all the numbered items that you have here. I guess the one piece that I'd like to see strengthened in whatever letter we send off to the state is the fact that you touched on it, but I'd like to see more emphasis put on it, is the fact that we did listen to the town. In the ADU bylaw that we developed over the last year really was in conjunction with the residents of Yarmouth and not just us as a planning agency. And with all the listening sessions and everything that was done, that, we've taken a lot of steps to get out in front of this and to have the state come in and make blanket statements of what we should and shouldn't be doing. I'm completely against. And, I couldn't say strongly enough that this letter needs to go to the state.
Okay, so I'm just trying to see where we might.
I think just in an opening paragraph.
just
I think just somewhere in the opening
point,
paragraph,
yeah.
we touch on the fact that, which you already have, Kathy, I just think it just needs to be strengthened, that, we did listen to the town and how much emphasis we put in listening to them to put together a comprehensive plan for ADUs in the town of Yarmouth.
Madam Chair, it is referenced in bullet point number 2, but maybe to Mr. Smith's point, we
Should
could
go
add a
there.
sentence or two
Yeah.
about the specificity of the length of time and the amount of engagement there was within the community, because it does say in here, we spent the past year working with our community, but maybe we can strengthen that up, Ken, is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yes, thank you, Will.
You're welcome.
Maybe just adding in some metrics, the number of listening sessions we had. Almost every single planning board meeting over the course of the year had this on the agenda.
And in our appearance at special town meeting, I think, Kathy, you had cataloged.
Yeah, I think we
There was a
had-
couple
I
of
think we had
sentences
the
in there
numbers, yeah.
that had all the numbers with the number of listening sessions,
Yeah.
the number of people, the number of comments, et cetera.
Right, I think we have that. I think you could grab that quickly.
Yeah, and I do like that I like what Ken
mentioned
said,
the length.
listening to our community to put together a comprehensive plan for ADUs. I mean, that's what we did, and this is how we did it, with the 3 listening sessions, da-da-da. Yep. If maybe when we vote on it, it can be one of those cases where I'll mark something up and we can just say, subject to approval of the chair.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I have a follow-up. Yes,
Rubenstein.
thank you very much, Madam Chair. A couple of comments. In general, I agree that this is a letter that should go, and it should go, I guess tomorrow, because tomorrow is the hearing. So that's good timing. There were a couple little things that I wanted to just follow up on. In number 4, I think it's just a language thing and I got lost. It says, and the potential for ADUs to be dual income households. I think we're trying to say the potential for ADUs to create dual income households. In other words.
To include, people who live there will be.
Okay, but it just, I got lost in the,
Yep.
we're creating a dual income household, but it's one ADU. So if you could just help me there.
I think it's a potential for ADUs to include dual
Okay,
income households.
That's even better.
Yeah.
The second had to do with a little more, considering a little more specificity, because I thought in this proposed bill, that they were basically saying that all ADUs should be by right.
You do.
They do.
But I'm not sure we're strong enough in saying, we don't like that. And I think it's, even though it took us a while as a board to get there, in terms of we had 3 carve-outs at one point, then we decided to pull back from that. But I think ultimately we decided that being very clear that every single ADU in our town should go through the special permit process. Maybe there's a way to reinforce that. Again, it depends on if everyone agrees. But I do feel like being pretty firm back to them to say, not only should you not come down from the mountain with the tablets and tell us what this is, but what's on the tablets is also not okay, specifically. So, because, again, if we're assuming that, some of these forces are beyond our control, then at least we can say, well, if you get to the specific pieces of all this, we strongly disagree with the idea that all ADUs should become by right. In other words, I'm just trying to look ahead to, if we're unable to prevent some of these changes from happening from a state down level, at least we can make it clear on the record that this is a very specific part of these changes that, again, backed up by all the work that we've done, that we're completely against. So I just wanted to mention that.
I think action at town meeting is all that really matters.
Well, right, and we can back
Town
it up.
meeting.
Exactly. And,
Voted.
the town has spoken very clearly in support of.
By 8 votes. So I purposely didn't include it because I wasn't sure how the board felt. I know there were some people who really liked at least some by right options, and I know that Jim was always very comfortable with by right, I think, for everything. And I didn't want that to be a bone of contention for you guys, but if you guys feel as a group that you're comfortable with adding that, we can certainly say something, expressing some concerns about automatic by right that, and that.
I think that's the issue, right? It's that all of a sudden, the door is open and everybody just gets to have an ADU who wants one. I'm sorry, Ken, I interrupted.
No, I was going to say, the reason I'm comfortable saying that it shouldn't be by right is because that's what the public said. It was strongly in favor that not everything was by right.
And that doesn't change the fact that the vote was close, okay?
That's right.
It was close, and yet, it was decided. And I don't know, it just struck me that, given all the work that we've done, as Ken brought up, for us not to say at this point that we're against a complete unilateral change to by right ADUs, I think would be a mistake. And again, I'm somebody that was very much okay with the 3 carve-outs, but we're not going back there because that's over. So I do feel like we did reach a consensus, Madam Chair, or at least enough so that we were able to say to the town, this is what we heard you say, so this is what we think you want, and then it was ratified. Again, I will, of course, defer to Kathy and the chair as to the final language. Thank you.
I think we can certainly include something in there. I just want to make sure that the full group is comfortable.
Of course,
with
and
that.
there's still a couple more people to hear from, Madam Chair.
I
just wanted to
am
express that.
comfortable with that. Mr. Slavik?
I'm fine with that as well. I suppose that's exactly what they're trying to combat to some degree, is that feeling is that the towns can eliminate the by right part of it, So you're
again, from the
kind,
opposite
does it
point.
automatically sort of put a target on that immediately, and sort of saying, this is what we don't want,
Sure.
I don't know, and then does it dismiss everything else?
And
Sort of
And it gets back to the funkiness of this entire apparatus being used
Right.
to kind of make these kinds of changes, policy changes.
somebody might say, see, this is exactly why we need this.
No, I
You
get
know,
it, I get
and
it.
I don't know if that sort of
Right.
undoes some of the,
Oh, yeah.
There is that whole, that's what Chapter 40B is, the anti-snob law. And that's why that went into effect, so that people couldn't say, oh, no, you can't put these housing projects near me or in my community. So there is the potential, I think. I know that's why they put it in, so that it wouldn't be a case of, you can't snob it out or say that it's not totally suitable. But you could certainly say things maybe related to item 2 in some fashion, that throughout this process, it was very clear that our community wanted to have, the checks and balances of having a special permit versus by right.
And I apologize, Mr. Slovak, for mispronouncing your name.
Oh, that's
I
fine.
got a
That's
little
fine.
tongue-tied there. I want to check in with Susan Britta. Susan, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, well, as you know, I was never a by right person, so I would love to see a strong statement about. And I don't know, I think, first of all, I think adding some metrics on what we did last year is very, very valuable. The number of public hearings we had, the number of times it was on the agenda, I think that's very valuable. On the by right versus the special permit, is it worth mentioning that, the necessity to preserve the residential character of communities on the Cape, necessitated a vigorous discussion of by right versus by special permit, and the town overwhelmingly, agreed that the special permit preserved the right to do something with an ADU, but the public had to be notified. But I don't know, something like that. I think it's worthwhile mentioning. I just don't know if we're opening up a hornet's nest here, because as you know, that's a huge issue with all communities. Is the whole issue of, and I don't think it's going to pass, by the way, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't say something. And I think we did a very good job. Because as you know, when the board started out, the majority of the board was very much by right with the carve-outs. And the community considered it, and they weighed against the necessity to maintain the residential character of the neighborhoods. And they came down on the side of special permit, because we can still do it, but you've got to let the people know what you're doing. Maybe something along the lines of the history of this town was by special permit, and we felt it necessary to preserve the rights of the citizens that they currently have, to consider these things only by special permit or something like that. But I think I think Will's right. I think it's worth saying, because it's a big issue. I just don't know how we word it without causing people to be annoyed.
I think maybe bringing it back to what we did in our community and why.
And why we did it, exactly.
Why we did it.
And,
Yeah.
and I think also the hurdle was a 2/3 vote.
Yeah.
It wasn't, Kathy, you mentioned 8 votes, but it was 2/3, which is a fairly difficult hurdle at any town meeting, and we made that. So I don't think we need to reinforce that, but from a majority-minority point of view,
Are you looking for room A for FinCom? I think they're in room A, no? Sorry.
it's okay. Anyway, I think that we can remind the Committee on Housing that zoning changes require a 2/3 vote. And,
They'll say, well, if you had it by right, it would only be majority.
well, we
let's-
met the higher threshold.
That's right.
We met the highest threshold, so. Any other comments that,
I had two other comments.
Susan?
Yeah, and the very first one, could we underline the word now? Designated as such now. That might get lost in the sentence, but I think the point there is we want the designation now before you do anything else. I think Kathy brought that up. Would it be worthwhile just underlining the word now? Just to highlight it?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, and then the very last sentence on the second page, where it says, in this spirit, we hope. I think that sentence is good, but I think it sounds like we're supplicants, and we're not. We're equal participants. I would strengthen that by saying something like, in this spirit, the planning board believes that the benefit of our home rule bylaw and our zoning bylaw and our new accessory apartment bylaw, should be allowed to stand, or is something along the lines of, we firmly believe that home rule, zoning bylaws, and as well as our new accessory bylaw should be allowed to stand. We believe that is the right thing to do. This sounds to me like we're like begging them for, we hope the state allows. I think we should say the planning board believes that what we have should be allowed to stand.
Rather than we hope.
Yeah, I think that sounds like, please help us.
Okay.
And we've taken a position, I think we should strengthen that sentence just a little bit to say, and I would say instead of we, I would say the planning board. I would reassert the title of the group. The planning board believes that the benefit of home rule in our zoning bylaw, as well as our new accessory bylaw, they should be allowed to stand. I mean, that's the basis of community participation, is home rule and local zoning. And we did a good job, and we believe they should be allowed to stand.
That's easy to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, just,
Or,
okay.
or,
that's
or
it.
simply not disturbed.
Yeah, or something like that, something
Yeah.
that.
Leave it
you know,
alone.
Leave it alone.
We worked hard on that.
Anything else? And everybody's okay with Kathy getting me a draft sometime before 5 PM tomorrow? So we can get it in? Okay. So I would like to make a motion then with regard to this, since it is a letter from us. Kathy's recommended we have a motion. May I have a motion to submit written comments to the Massachusetts Legislature Joint Committee on Housing on the Affordable Homes Act as agreed upon this evening,
Subject to approval
subject to approval
of the chair.
of the chair?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're going to send that to me, Joanne?
I'm going to give it to you before I leave the room.
You're the best. Thank you.
Okay, short-term rentals.
Madam Chair, would you
Gonna
like to
vote.
vote? It's okay.
Joanne,
Just
can
doing
I
my
ask?
clerk, just doing my clerk job.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second, yes.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote. Mr. Rubenstein?
Aye.
Mr. Slovak?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Britta?
Aye.
And Ms. Crowley, aye. Unanimous. Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I ask a question?
You may.
When the legislation talks about this, this commission, this seasonal community coordinating council, and they talk about membership on it.
Yeah.
One of the members is going to be someone from the Cape and Islands. Is there any way, can we put an oar in the water and ask the town to like make a recommendation, or can we try to get someone from our community on that? Can we submit some names? How is that going to, the state's going to make the appointment, but how can we make some recommendations to the state that we've got some really qualified people? Do you think the town's going to, I just don't want, I think if we did a really good job, I think, I'm not saying someone from the planning board, but, someone that was active in the ADU arena, whether it's, us or someone from Harwich or someone that, is there any way we can submit some names for possible consideration?
I'm just looking at that section 33 where they say there shall be a seasonal community
right.
coordinating council. I don't see where they define
There's-
membership.
Well, they do say one from, there's one from the southeastern region and one whom shall be from the Cape and Islands, Madam Chair.
Oh,
But then
okay.
it goes
Line
on to say-
748.
Oh, okay.
goes
Missed
on to
that.
say the governor,
And 4 persons appointed. It basically,
Right.
there's 4 appointees, one from the west, one from the northeast, one from the southeast, one from the Cape. And I-
right, and it says the appointees shall be, have expertise in hospitality, tourism, and housing development and finance. So there is some basic requirements there. And we do have a treasure trove of people that meet all those I'm just thinking ahead, if we could get someone, if we can be proactive and maybe make some recommendations to the town administrator or to the Board of Selectmen. It may just be a gesture, but it would show that we eagerly want to participate in this council, especially because of our tourism. Just a thought, Nothing we have to do right now, but just a thought.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have no idea how these appointments work.
I don't know whether it's.
Appointees by the governor, it's going to be, candidly, it's going to be somebody that the governor is familiar with and knows, and in all seriousness, probably is going to have,
Maybe makes a donation or two. You never know. You never know. It's possible.
Okay. Okay, next item on our agenda is short-term rentals.
I know we had discussed this a little bit in our December meeting of something that needs to happen because we have a sunset clause that's happening in November 13th of 2024. But in having discussions with some other staff members, specifically the town clerk, when might the fall town meeting happen? And with the presidential elections, they're going to be swamped. So the likelihood, they would obviously prefer not to have it at the end of October, because they're going to be very busy running up to the presidential election. And then the week after that has the Veterans Day holiday in it, and so it probably would end up, or could potentially end up after the expiration or sunset clause for this section. And we don't want to run the risk of losing that. So all this is kind of like a very short housekeeping item for the annual town meeting that basically just extends the sunset clause, and I just picked a date of November 30th of 2026. I also like the idea of getting this article before the Board of Selectmen so we can get a little bit better idea of what they're thinking of wanting some additional studies in short-term rentals and kind of what they're thinking of with regard to this. Some preliminary quick reviews. There wasn't a lot of complaints that we got here, like in the building department this past year. There was a couple parking-related ones, and Mark was able to contact the owners, and they seemed to be addressed fairly quickly. So I'm sure there might be a lot of people out there who had complaints but never submitted them. But people actually calling and complaining about things happens fairly frequently, so I would think if it was a significant issue, people would be contacting. So that's what this article is about, so I'm just kind of looking for some consensus from you guys to put this before the select board for the annual town meeting, and then maybe some ideas with regard to the date. I do.
Question, Madam Chair? May I ask why you chose a 2-year, specifically chose a 2-year extension rather than a 1-year?
I just didn't want to run into any issues. Typically, I don't know why I picked such a short time frame before, because typically you give yourself like 4 or 5 years in order to evaluate things and see how things are going.
Peter?
I don't know if this is what Will was thinking, but I would prefer a shorter time frame. I think it's still relatively new. We have a new ADU. We have other uncertainties. Why not review it in a year if we extend it again?
I think that's kind of what I was thinking. Our original intent was good, and I understand that this particular fall is funky. But I'm not sure, I'm trying to go back in the time machine to think about a year and a half ago. We asked for, it was 2 years, right? So it was 2 years from
2
November of
years.
'22.
Well, it was a year and a half. It was annual town meeting 2022.
Ah, okay.
So we gave it a year and then some.
Yeah,
But there was a good, I'm trying to remember the conversations. There was a reason for that, and that's why I'm bringing this up about now extending it another 2 years. I think there had to be a reason why we didn't want it to go much longer.
Yeah, I think part of it was the evaluation process of short-term rentals and putting a sunset clause to take a stop point to say, is this a detriment to the town? My feeling about short-term rentals, no matter what we say and believe, all of us in this room, they're not going away. So either we extend this and put a date on it. I don't have any problem with 2 years, because my feeling about it, if you can set it at a year and say a year from now, everyone says, no, we don't want them anymore. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to go underground and people are going to still do them. It's as simple as that. So my feeling about it, I have no problem with the 2026 deadline. At that point, if you want to take a stop and take a breath and see where the town's at with it, who knows what's going to happen with rentals and that whole, economy in 2 years from now. I can't tell you. I mean, who would have thought how much the hotel industry's changed in the last 10 years? So I don't have a huge issue with the 2026 date. I'm not going to fight it either way if you say put it at 25, but I don't see an issue with it setting it at 26 is my comment.
Susan?
as I recall the conversation, actually, the shorter year review was actually an idea that the industry brought to the board. They were willing and suggested, we'll come back in a year. Let's try it for a year and see what happens. So the concept of the sort of the steps we took to do the yearly review was not something we were insisting about. It's something the industry came to us and said, look, let's try this. Let's look at it in a year and see what happens. So I like the 2025. I think, it gives them a year and a half, gives the town a year and a half, it gives the board a year and a half. In that year and a half, I'm sure the Chamber of Commerce is going to come back. The motel folks will come back. That gives us plenty of time to make any changes. I just don't think letting it go out 2.5 years, it will be, quite a while from the time this passes. So I like the 2025 deadline. I don't like it going out that far. That's my personal opinion. But the concept of the yearly review, that wasn't anything we fought over. That's something that the industry basically said.
Susan,
"Would you do it?"
Susan, my apologies, but I think we're confusing this short-term rental bylaw with the motel bylaw,
Right, no, but the same logic.
where there was a
applies-
yearly check-in that we didn't
Right.
have this year, but we did have after the first year. Sorry, go
Right,
ahead.
But the same conversation applied when they talked about short-term
Oh,
rentals.
I don't recall
the
that.
same-
I don't recall that at all.
Yeah, it was the same kind of logic. Let's see how it works. Let's see how it works for you. It really is irrelevant, but I do think the shorter time frame is better for the town. I think it's better for the board, and I think it's better for the town.
I think it was done because we were pushing in such a short period of time. It was really an expedited article because that case law happened in July of 2021. There was all kinds of rumblings and changes and concerns being expressed that fall. We were getting calls from short-term rental firms saying, are they legal in the town of Yarmouth? There was a lot of ambiguity to it, and to prevent them being any issue, we moved very quickly with the regulations at the annual town meeting in 2022, but we wanted to let people put the sunset clause in so people would feel comfortable voting for something that might have been a little bit quick for them. I mean, certainly wasn't like the process that we went through with the accessory apartments. So I think maybe we kept it kind of short because we thought that might make it more palatable.
Yeah. I think that's exactly why it was,
Yeah, that's my recollection as well, Kathy. We needed to get it passed because the zoning bylaw was silent, did not even contain the words short-term rentals. And when zoning bylaws are silent on things, you can get into some difficulty. So this came up rather quickly, and we wanted to make it as attractive for a positive vote as possible, and we did. I guess my interest, the timeframe, I'm willing to go 1 year or 2 years, but I guess I'd like to get a sense, I would like this to be permanent at some point.
This is the outer line. We could certainly come back at next fall town meeting, and the only thing that we would do is maybe tweak a couple things or nothing and just take out the
permanent.
sunset clause
Eliminate
and
the
make it
sunset
permanent.
clause, right.
This gives us time because I'm very unclear. I know that there's been some discussions, the select board, some members have expressed some concerns about short-term rentals and how they're impacting our year-round housing stock, and I know there's some discussion of maybe doing a similar study as was done in Provincetown, but also then coming up with some suggestions or some strategies. So maybe it's not just zoning, maybe there's looking at something else, maybe it's a general bylaw that kind of goes along with it. I want to give us enough time so that we can just do this once. And if we say 1 year and then we continue it again, they're going to say, why didn't you get that done? And it's like, we're going to be doing the local comprehensive plan at the same time. So there's other people we might be relying on, like the Affordable Housing Trust, to engage UMass Dartmouth to do that type of analysis. And how quickly they do it plays into how quickly we can do it. So giving us a little bit of time and not continually extending, I think, I feel a little bit more comfortable with the 2026
With the 2
timeline.
years. I also want to now jump to your side on that, Kathy. Just because of the engagement of the Board of Selectmen, that alone adds time. Once they get involved, and they will on this, there are several members who are actively interested in this. If we have to continually engage the board and go back and forth with the select board, it's just going to take time. So I'd like to do it right once.
thank you, Madam Chair.
right?
I'm glad that we had this discussion, and I'm glad we brought it up, and I do obviously feel we need to do something now so that it can get to the select board next week or the week after, I'm not sure which. But I'm okay with 2026.
Doesn't mean we can't do it sooner, you know, if all the cards align and
Yeah.
and everything, so. So is there the consensus of the board to send this as, kind of as is to the select board for incorporation into the warrant?
I'm comfortable with it.
Susan?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm glad we talked about it, because I started thinking of some stuff I hadn't thought about either, so.
Well, that's good. Okay. Meeting minutes from January 3rd, I think.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes of January 3rd, 2024.
Second,
All right. Mr. Rubenstein?
Aye.
Mr. Slovak?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
aye.
Ms. Britta?
I need to abstain. I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay, and myself, aye. Any committee updates?
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein?
There was a RAC meeting on the 8th, and I had to write a little summary. Hope I can read my own handwriting. So the good news, big picture, is that the town is making progress with DEP, continuous progress. It was not so true when I started on the RAC in October. But they've actually gotten to the point where the state DEP folks are now meeting bi-weekly with the town administrator and Jeff Colby and our consultants as a working group, which I
That's
take
huge.
to be a very large step forward. In fact, I don't have the results, but the second working group meeting was actually scheduled for this afternoon, or today. But all the focus is on the groundwater discharge permit, specifically at the resource facility and the groundwater heights and/or flows and ebbs and all of that. So to get to the timing of all of this, which I know Ken had asked me about and many others I'm sure are curious about, in order to keep our financing in line, which we all voted for at town meeting, a couple of town meetings ago, I think, we must have at least a partial groundwater discharge permit issued by October 31st. So usually the deadline is July 1st, but we're able to there is a little bit of a grace period in there till October 31st, so we can stay qualified. And assuming this working group makes progress at DEP and we get a limited permit, to answer your question from last meeting, Mr. Smith, it looks like construction on the new, I'm going to call it a septic treatment plant, apologies to all my friends out there, would be January of '25.
Okay.
And in the meantime, though, something that's going to happen much sooner is that the contracts have been awarded for what's called contracts 2 and 3. So basically, we're talking Parkers River Bridge, east, 28 Long Pond to North Main Street, that section, and then the whole South Shore Drive section loop. Again, getting to the bridge. The bridge itself has been carved out because, as we all know, there's all kinds of stuff going on at the bridge, short and long term. So those contracts have been awarded. So what that means now is the next step is the one and only sewer stub location form mailing will be happening. So for folks, the hundreds of property owners, I think it's in the next 30 days. So nothing's going to happen tomorrow. But I'd say in the next 2 to 3 weeks, folks in those areas will start to see some communication from the town to say, hey, septic
Ready
is
to hook
coming.
up? Yeah.
And this is where your hookup would be on your property, and here's where you look it up on the town website to see where we think it's going to be. So obviously, there'll be a lot more communication from our new communications director as well as the DPW office, but those letters and postcards, no letters, will be going out. And a lot of those property owners are commercial, but there's certainly a fair amount of residential as well in these first 2 contracts. So you'll start to see that. So I think that's some of the first sort of like, oh, wow, this septic thing is actually happening, kind of happening. Because as we know, and as you've taught me before I swapped with you, Ken, that the wheels of septic justice turn slowly. And so I would say in our town, like, there hasn't been a lot of like, well, what is actually happening, right? Like, is there construction happening? Well, the truth is, in the next 60 to 90 days, those letters will be, well, 30 days letters, and then 60 to 90, I'd say somewhere after that, late spring, I think we're going to start seeing some real work starting to happen in those areas. Now, of course, in terms of, well, when can I hook up and when is treatment going to start to flow? Respectfully, I would say that's 2028 in terms of when the plant's online and when everything is, some of the sections are hooked up. So that's the timetable as of now, but it does look like, working backwards, 11 and a half months from now, Ken, that we will start construction on the plant itself.
Just having the state coming down, meeting with us bi-monthly.
Yes.
Is huge, because they didn't even answer our phone for 3 months, so.
And then when they finally did, they said, oh, by the way, we don't like your groundwater analysis, you know, in terms of the height of where the plant was going to be versus the amount of water that flows through a system like that, as you can imagine, in July and August versus January and February. So that's the general, yet pretty detailed update.
Was 2028 something that was said at the meeting? Was that sort of your?
No, I mean,
Is it?
I'd have to look at the official meeting, but I'm pretty sure in my notes here, I sort of worked backwards.
Respectfully, I think.
It's all in the documents. Basically, it says here, completion and commissioning of the WRRF, septic treatment plant, by June of '27, with flow expected to be received 6 months after startup. So I wrote January of '28.
That's,
So I'm not saying anything I'm not supposed to say.
yeah.
But again, in the short term, those two contracts that have been awarded are going to start to, they're going to start to happen.
That's great news.
It is, so it is. So I guess in general, because that was the thing that I was always disconnected about. And remember, I live in a part of town where, you know, hopefully I'll have grandchildren by then. Who knows? Maybe they'll have children. You know, Yarmouth Port isn't going to see septic for a long, long time. So I'm excited that there's going to start some action in the areas that are called Phase 1. We have to get Phase 1 to start phasing.
Yeah, my biggest concern was losing out on the optimal funding.
and the money,
That's
right.
That's the part that I was concerned about.
Thanks to this working group, it feels like, and yes, a little extra 90-day cushion in there, it feels like by mid to late summer, we'll have at least a partial permit, which will allow us to then get the contract bidded and then awarded by 1031, and then hopefully starting construction in January 25. I think that's a long enough committee update, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Just to be clear.
Sure.
I wouldn't call it septic, because that's what we have now.
Oh, sorry. I
Sewering.
could, right. I shouldn't call it a sewer treatment. Okay.
I just don't want to confuse
Water
people at
Resource
all.
Recovery Facility, which
That's right.
never a more bureaucratic term has been created, Madam Chair.
I like the wastewater treatment facility. That's what it used to be. It was very obvious what it is. Now they've changed the name.
Yeah, I like that better. It's one less word. WTF is way better. It also stands for some other things. Anyway, Madam Chair, thank you. Maybe that's why,
No, they do WWTF.
that's why they changed it from WTF. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other committee updates?
None at this time.
I have none.
I think that was enough committee updates.
That was an important one.
Yeah, it's good news.
Any other board member items? Kathy has been sending out your ZBAs.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
And there was an accessory,
Yes.
well, family-related.
Family
Family-related, right? Because the other ones can't start to happen until
Right.
they can happen. That's nice.
Anything else from you, Kath? LCP, maybe we can give a quick update on our work?
Yes, we did conduct 2 interviews. We have selected, I think, our preferred consultant. We did open the cost proposals today and chose, basically selected a consultant. We can't say yet because the letters haven't gone out.
Right.
But it's how we thought things would go. So that's hopefully something that would, Svetlana's going to be working on the award letters. And then also she has to write up a summary of the whole process for the files, and then we can start working on the contract. So I would like to think that maybe we could have something going on. I would like to have something going on before you guys having our kickoff meeting, like our second meeting in March would be my ideal. But getting contracts executed in the town of Yarmouth is not always as easy as it sounds. So that's good, it's good news. I mean, I think we got a good consultant, and I think we'll be very happy. I just wanted to bring up that there is, and I sent it around to you, on Wednesday, January 24th, next Wednesday at 6 PM here in the hearing room and also via Zoom, will be an update on the Upper Bass River Restoration Project. It's going to be talking about the two bridges on Weir Road and North Dennis Road, and then also the whole restoration of the former bogs in that area. So it'll be very interesting, and certainly love for people to come out and hear about that. And I'm sure it will be recorded as well. That was it.
Any news on the Route 28 study from Bill Scott? The consultant's going to hire for that?
Yeah, I talked to, actually, Bill stopped by my office this morning. He started looking at the, writing up the scope for the marketing study. I think there was some idea that the marketing study might be more of a different type of firm necessarily than would be doing the mixed-use analysis and also the illustrations, and be more of a designer, planner type group versus more of a number cruncher, maybe looking at the marketing study, assessing our demographics and what type of different types of businesses we need here and how we can attract them to come here. So that's getting started, and hopefully that will all be done in conjunction with the LCP, because those are going to become a major component of our economic section of the LCP.
That'd be great.
May I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Sure.
So, the new gas station on Station Avenue is rapidly taking shape. In fact, I even saw pumps.
Really?
I saw branded pumps there today. Not that they're connected to anything, I don't think. But I just wanted a reminder, because it's been 18 months. Once that Seasons comes online, are the other two gas stations on either side of Station Avenue going offline, so that we will net be mobile Seasons, no more gas stations?
That is
Isn't that
correct.
the understanding? Okay.
My understanding is that when that new Shell station comes online, the old Shell is to be decommissioned, and the site's to be decommissioned,
Right now, yes.
and Sunoco on the corners, the pumps to be removed,
But still
and that's
be a-
still just service center at that point.
I think they have, the service has to go as well, I think, but they have
Oh,
a
really?
certain time. I think they have 4 years or something, maybe
I
from,
was not aware
There
of that.
can't be anything there.
it cannot be basically the two prohibited uses in a Zone 2, which was the mechanics,
Yep.
service bays, and then the gas.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the gallonage at the new Shell is less than the gallonage at
Right,
the
at the
two.
two.
It's two
Right.
combined.
And then the one adjacent to the rail trail, who knows what'll happen to that property after it's decommissioned?
My understanding, Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, the current Shell station, when that's decommissioned, what I had heard, and this, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the site itself is to be completely decommissioned and taken down and reforested, trees and stuff planted.
Yeah, they needed a nitrogen mitigation.
Right.
Because they were having more wastewater flow than would be allowed based on the size of the lot that they have, and they used that lot because they owned it as their nitrogen mitigation. I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to look for some other land to swap that out with in the future.
Okay.
And it's only temporary. Once sewers go up Station Avenue, then it wouldn't be needed anymore either.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure. Anything else? May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Rubenstein?
Aye.
Mr. Slovak?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Britta?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Thank you all.